so glad you came. We're going to read a story today. But first, I need your help. There are no words in my storybook. So, I need you to use your Freedom Fairy magic to make a wordy wish. Can you do that? It goes like this. I wish, wish, wish for a Freedom Fairy wish. Oh! There are words in my book now. Let's begin. Sophie was a human who loved Freedom Fairies. She loved them so much she even had a special Freedom Fairy book. It told her about the places Freedom Fairies like to visit in human land and what they liked to do when they stayed. One day, she went out into the sunshine, down the little path and to the big apple tree at the bottom of the garden, hoping to see a Freedom Fairy. She stayed outside for ages and ages, almost until tea time, but she couldn't find any Freedom Fairies. My book says they like to visit gardens, so where are they? Wondered Sophie. Maybe my garden is just one without Freedom Fairies, she thought. At dinner time, Sophie was sad. She didn't know why the Freedom Fairies hadn't come to say hello. She decided to ask her mummy to help because she was very clever and knew lots of things. Her mummy told her that she needed to use all her senses, not just her eyes, when she looks for Freedom Fairies. Because Freedom Fairies and other magical folk make themselves extra super duper hidden when they visit to protect them from all the human land bugs and beasties. The next day, Sophie went out into the sunshine, down the little path and to the big apple tree at the bottom of the garden. She sat in a shady spot and thought about using her senses. It was pretty tricky at first, but Sophie really wanted to meet the Freedom Fairies. So she knew she had to focus. She closed her eyes and listened. She sniffed the air in a long, deep breath. She felt grass and wind on her skin. Then she opened her eyes and peered up into the big tree. For a little while, nothing changed. Sophie was just about to give up and go back inside when she could suddenly hear twinkling bells. They were far off at first, but they got louder and louder. She could smell sweet flowers and honeydew drops. Ooh, yum. She felt the whistling wind. It was so warm, and the grass tickled her. She looked all the way up into the highest branches of the big apple tree. And then, sure enough, from inside one of the apple blossoms, a Freedom Fairy peered out. Hello, my name is Freedom Fairy Peaches, and I'm a fruit Freedom Fairy, said the Freedom Fairy. She was so delighted a human had taken the time to be able to see her. Who are you? Hello, Freedom Fairy Peaches. I'm Sophie, and I'm so excited a fairy is visiting my garden today. What brings you to human land? Asked Sophie. Well, I have just been collecting nectar from this flowering apple tree to put in my famous Applebee biscuits, Peaches replied. How were you able to spot me in this huge, great big garden? Sophie smiled and told her how she had used her sense of smell, sight, touch and sound. Oh, very good, giggled Freedom Fairy Peaches. But there is one more sense that you have forgotten about. Sophie looked confused and asked which one she had missed. Freedom Fairy Peaches reached up into the tree and picked a tiny apple blossom. She held it in her hand, and Sophie watched it magically grow and ripen into a shiny red apple. You missed taste, of course, giggled Freedom Fairy Peaches and handed Sophie the apple. Well, I better be getting home. My bee friends are so very excited to try my Applebee biscuits, but it was lovely to meet you. It was lovely to meet you too, Freedom Fairy Peaches. Thank you for the apple, replied Sophie. Now, Sophie, I'm sure all of my Freedom Fairy friends would love to meet you, so you must remember, wherever you are, to pay attention to what you can see, smell, feel, and taste. Yum, instructed Freedom Fairy Peaches. Then make a big Freedom Fairy wish and wait patiently for a brave Freedom Fairy friend to emerge, Freedom Fairy Peaches said, with a final flutter of her wings before she flew up, 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 past the tall apple tree and all the way up to the sky. "Goodbye, Freedom Fairy Peaches," called Sophie, as she watched her go back to Freedom Fairyland. She was so excited to have met a Freedom Fairy. So excited, in fact, that she decided to add instructions in her fairy book about how using your 5 senses can help you find a magical Freedom Fairy friend. And now, wherever she is, she remembers her 5 senses in the hopes that she'll one day get a chance to meet another Freedom Fairy friend. The end. Thank you so much for listening. What a wonderful story. Until next time, Freedom Fairy Flutterby!